Hello and welcome to another episode of the Doctor Lawyer Breakdown, a show with a unique perspective on everything from the mundane to the arcane. I'm your host, Bradford Keaty, and I'm seated here with Dr. Joseph Ramos once again. How are you, Dr. Ramos?
Again, my friend.
Excited for another round?
Totally excited. I love these episodes with you.
This has been great. And this is our first episode where we get to actually jump into a topic. This is our first real breakdown.
I am excited about that. We talked all that stuff about me and my past. It made me relive my childhood.
Yeah. And that unique perspective, I'm glad we got to dive into it. It's our first 4 episodes. So folks, if you're new to the show and you want to learn a little bit more about Dr. Ramos's perspective, go back, listen to the first 4 episodes and understand where the doctor attorney is coming from and how he's going to share.
You dissected that well through those 4 episodes, but now we get into the good stuff.
That's right. But before we get into this topic, which I saw on a just kind of random flipping through headlines the other day and thought it was perfect for the show, I want to address our sign-off from the last episode.
Oh, the question that you ended with.
Yes. So the question was, which bar game is Dr. Ramos the worst at? And we had pool, shuffleboard, and trivia as the answers you came up with. Okay. Now, my answer was pool. I think that billiards is not your game.
Whoa.
However, the audience said shuffleboard. Maybe it's because you look so young. But either way, what's the answer? What are you the worst at?
For a change, everybody's wrong.
Everyone's wrong?
Big X, yes. Definitely trivia. And here is why. So in a small town, there's not a lot to do. Remember, I grew up in a small town with, 150 people. But the bars would let us go in because there's nothing else to do in town.
Sure.
And shoot pool and play shuffleboard.
Oh.
So we shot pool and played shuffleboard all the time. So much they put a pool table in the high school.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I went away to college, me and my buddies, when we rented a house, we put a pool table in the house because we all have pool so much. And I have a pool table in my current house.
There you go.
So pool is my game. Shuffleboard, I have a shuffleboard table in my house because I also love shuffleboard. Too. So I'm pretty decent at both.
Okay.
Now trivia.
I would not have guessed this. With all the education?
Here's why. So I'm a biology major, chemistry minor. You ask me something in those areas in trivia, I'm pretty tough.
Okay.
If you start asking me about some TV show and some actor and the whole, we didn't have that. We didn't have TV. We didn't get like TV really until probably my sophomore, junior year. I don't know, in high school, it was really good TV. Before that was the antenna for the news type of thing. Yeah. So when you don't know those aspects in trivia, you have to be well-rounded.
Yeah, that's true.
And I am not in those areas, so I'm not a good trivia player.
So there you go. Well, I mean, I hope I can challenge you at pool sometime, but I won't keep my hopes up that I'll win.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Well, so back to this subject headline that I was flipping around. Okay. So we talked about how the Doctor Lawyer Breakdown is about what lives in the zip code at the intersection of law and medicine.
Yes.
Well, I saw a headline the other day, and it's the FDA removes black box from menopausal hormone therapy. I wanted to make sure I got that quote exactly right. So I saw that and I immediately am thinking to myself, I have so many questions. And this feels like it fits right in that zip code, right?
No, it does.
You've got what I'm guessing is some kind of a label or something. I don't even know what a black box is, right? And then coming off of hormone therapy, it's been the talk of the town for a couple years now.
Yeah.
So here's what I want to start with.
Yep.
Let's do some context.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Help me understand what these things are. First question, what the heck is a black box?
Okay, great. This is a fantastic topic. You're right. Hormone therapy is big. That big press release that came out was very big from the FDA, Department of Health and Human Services. And the black box, you have to understand the black box to understand exactly what they're talking about.
Okay.
With with a lot of medications, I'm going to say every medication, but hundreds, 400 or 500 medications. With every medication that comes out, there's an instructional sheet that talks about the medicine, how it works, where it works, what it's for, what the dose is.
Okay.
For a whole bunch of them, hundreds of medications, there's also a black box, literally a black box at the top of the sheet, the informational sheet, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
And it's in bold. And it is if there has been any sort of finding with that medication during testing that would suggest the possibility of death, disability, long-term adverse effect. If there's been something dangerous, really dangerous, like the doctor better think about it and the patient better think about it before they take that medicine.
Okay.
And most people are surprised to hear that it's on hundreds of medications.
So,
in fact, hold on real quick. I want to ask you a question.
Oh, here we go. Flipping the script on me.
Change the podcast here.
We go.
I'm talking to Bradford now.
Okay.
Have you ever taken a medicine with a black box label?
I have no idea.
See, that's how most people answer. That's why I asked you the question. Have you ever taken Tylenol?
I have taken Tylenol.
Oh, black box label right there, my friend.
Okay, well, what about like ibuprofen?
There's black box labels on some NSAIDs as well, yes.
Okay.
But let me explain to you the Tylenol one.
Yeah.
Because everybody's taking it. Levaquin, a common antibiotic. There's a black box label on it. There's black box labels on a lot of medicines that we all take. The one on Tylenol, let's just use one that everybody would understand. What the black box label says is this can be toxic to your liver and cause liver failure. Now, we all might go, gosh, why do we take Tylenol? Well, here's the kicker. And by the way, I think the last time I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, but probably 1,600 to 2,000 cases a year of liver failure from misuse of Tylenol. Not abuse, not attempted suicide. I'm talking the misuse, taking too much. Why? Because more than 4 grams a day of Tylenol is toxic to your liver and will start to kill it. 4 grams a day. If you think about it, an acetaminophen tablet, Tylenol, 500 milligrams. That means if you took 2 of them 4 times a day, 2 Tylenol 4 times a day, you've hit a toxic dose.
Wow.
Yeah, scary, right?
8 Tylenol.
8 Tylenol. So,
well, I shouldn't say 8. Obviously, sometimes they're 1,000, sometimes they're 500. But you got to pay attention to those labels.
You have to pay attention to those labels. So black box labels are there for a reason. They found with Tylenol, to stay in that lane here, that as few as 4,000 milligrams or 8 500 milligram tablets per day was toxic to the liver. 1,600 to 2,000 people a year go on the liver transplant list.
Because of Tylenol?
Because of that.
Wow. I had no idea.
It's incredible, right?
Well, because one of my next questions was like, I've obviously never heard of these black box, right? Yeah. I mean, my mom taught me when you're taking meds, look at the ingredients, but and I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it does have a black outline to it. Yeah. But I just would look at that to make sure I wasn't taking too much of, that's what we learn as kids. Like, hey, you can take some Tylenol, but don't take too much. But there's actually a name for that warning label, and it's literally called a black box.
Called a black box, and it comes out when the drugs are being developed and before they get cleared by the FDA for release.
Okay.
In all the studies they do that take 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes longer, they track all the adverse events.
Okay.
And when they start to notice a pattern to adverse events, if it's a bad, life-threatening one, it gets a black box label. Medicine still may get released for use, just like Tylenol. Very useful, very helpful.
Right.
But it has a black box label with it.
Okay. So
400 medicines, 500 medicines, just like that.
This is not unique to prescription medication.
Right.
So it's everywhere.
That's right. Yeah, okay. Great point. Prescription medicine, non-prescription, pay attention to the dosing, pay attention to the instruction sheets that come out. They're there for a reason.
Well, and the Tylenol example is blowing my mind, and we're not even 10 minutes into the show, because I mean I always remember hearing that as a kid, like don't take too much Tylenol, but like I never really knew what too much was, but I also didn't really know that I should probably be studying those boxes a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe be on the liver transplant list.
Don't want that. Yeah, don't want that. Okay, so you said that during testing, if there's an adverse effect that's identified, then they will say, okay, this has to have a black box label. So what is considered what is considered an adverse effect is kind of silly. Obviously death, liver failure, and significant impacts on somebody taking the medication. But how does that testing process occur? How do we get there?
Yeah, so let me clarify that. So there's 2 ways to get a black box label. Most come out when the medicine is released for use to the public.
Okay.
Because it's been tested for that 7 or 8 years and thousands of patients, and they notice, hey, this medicine, if you take too much, they all have liver failure. If you don't take too much, it's very, very helpful. So they put the black box label on when it's released.
Okay.
Other medicines, and this is what happened in the case of hormones.
Okay.
Get a black box label added later. In other words, what happens is that medicine starts getting used in society and it starts getting studied and they do and it's released and people are using it, and then they realize the pattern. Later it comes up. Then the black box label gets added on later. So sometimes it's at first, most of the time.
Sure.
But sometimes the black box label comes on later. And this whole thing with hormones was a really big thing here at the end of 2025, start of 2026, because of that black box label thing that you saw, as did all of the the U.S. for that matter.
Yeah, no, it was one of the Google headlines, and I why I grabbed it for us today, because I'm like, this is everywhere. I gotta ask the doctor about it. Yeah. So okay, let's get a little bit more specific then. Good. So I mean, hormone therapy is not like the last 5 years new sort of thing, right? I feel like I've heard about it a lot in the last 5 years, but this isn't like, there's more of a medical history to it than that, right?
Yeah, long medical history of people getting replaced with hormones, men with testosterone predominantly, women with estrogen and progesterone predominantly. That's gone on for years and years and years.
Okay, so 1960s, earlier?
Yeah, I would say probably even a little earlier. When it really started getting probably common was in the 70s and 80s, though, is when it probably started getting common, probably 80s.
Okay.
And then actually, I think it was in the 1990s when they did the landmark study, I think in 1992, the Women's Health Initiative, that really shut down hormone use.
Let's dive into that a little bit more, right? Because it sounds like hormone use for men unaffected since, let's say, the 80s. But there's this landmark study in the 90s. How do we get to that point as as Americans in society that we go, hey, we got to stop doing this? Help me understand that.
Yeah, so what they did was as hormone therapy became more popular in the 80s and 90s, it started getting studied more. Anything that more people are taking, it's easier to study.
Right.
And again, don't hold me to this, but I think it was 1992. They did this thing called the Women's Health Initiative, and it was actually got, as I recall, a bunch of federal funding, $800 million or something. It was a ton of money got poured into it, and they studied thousands of patients. And they were basically giving females aged 60 to 70 replacement estrogen and progesterone. And whenever you do a study, you separate out study groups. So you have one group that gets a placebo pill, sugar pill,
right,
and one group that gets the actual hormone. And then you watch the groups. And if everybody in one group reports a bunch of feeling better and great effects and no more adverse effects than the people in the sugar group, you go, oh, that medicine might be good for that. I'm breaking down pretty basic.
Yeah, simplify. Yeah.
But as you go along in a study like this, if one side starts having adverse effects, rarely will something get so adverse, like maybe people get a little bit more headache in one group, or maybe they get a little bit more dehydrated in one group.
In the group that's actually getting the medication.
Who's actually getting the medicine.
Right.
Now there's people that are blinded to this. Some researcher in the background knows who's getting what because somebody has to.
Right.
And he's watching, he sees if there's an adverse effect that's life-threatening, cancer, death, heart attack, stroke. Rarely does that happen, but if it does, they stop the study. And that's what they did in the Women's Health Initiative. They started giving the one group of 60 to 70-year-olds hormones, estrogen and progesterone. The other group they gave the sugar pills to. The 60 to 70-year-olds started getting increased risks of breast cancer, stroke, and I think it was cardiovascular disease, blood clots, I think. Stroke, blood clot, and cancer, breast cancer. Those three things were the big common things. And so much so, that group started getting so much so they stopped the study, and then it came out, hormones are terrible. And all women were against them, and they got the black box warning. This causes stroke, blood clot, and breast cancer. And you can imagine that it shut down hormone use.
Probably immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Wow. Okay. So do we know why those adverse effects were going on?
Yeah, and that kind of gets to why great question.
Yeah.
This one gets to why the black box label got removed. So if all that's happening, if you're listening to this, it's like,
I still don't want to do it.
We're doing this, right?
Yeah,
they did actually. What they found in the study were several major errors.
Okay.
And this came with more studies later. So what really stinks for women is for all these years that hormones have been like, whoa, don't do it. They lived with hot flashes, night sweats, weight gain, disproportionate bone loss, increased fractures, moodiness, vaginal dryness, poor sex drive. I mean, hormones, for the most part, fix all of that.
Yeah.
Women had to go all these years without it. So there were some women along the way that were like, listen, I'll take my risk of breast cancer. This other stuff is
I don't want to deal with it. Of
so
course.
bad.
Of
I'll
course.
just take it. But doctors then were just scared to death to write it. So
Yeah.
sometimes women were getting it from other countries and stuff. And they're living young, vibrant lives, and their skin is good, and their weight balance is good, and their bones are stronger. And what ends up happening is more studies end up getting done. And what they found was in that Women's Health Initiative, first of all, the study group they picked was postmenopausal, meaning women who had already gone through menopause, age 60 to 70, went on hormones.
Okay, and this is in the study in the 90s.
In the 90s, that shut it down.
That shut it down.
That caused the black box warning.
Got it.
That was one thing, the age group selected. Second thing was they gave all of these women their hormones orally. Now, when you give hormones orally, what we've learned since is that if I give you an estrogen pill orally, it goes in, it gets metabolized. It goes down into your gut, goes down and gets metabolized, broken down in the stomach, absorbed through the intestines. When it gets absorbed, it goes, first place it goes, outside the intestines, there's a bunch of veins called the portal venous system.
Okay.
That group of veins draws blood into the liver, and it metabolizes everything that is absorbed. So we absorb vitamins, when we absorb food, it goes in, gets absorbed, gets put in the bloodstream, goes to the liver, gets metabolized, and goes out to everywhere. What they found is when it was getting metabolized in liver, it was changing form. It was no longer estradiol or estriol, which were the forms that we were giving. It was actually a 4-hydroxyl estrogen and a 2-hydroxyl estrogen, meaning metabolism in the liver changed the form of the medication to essentially a metabolite, not the medicine they took.
So hold on, I got to do this. I'm not a doctor.
This is complex,
Yeah. Okay, so because you're taking these hormone supplements, is supplement the right word? Or is it replacement?
It's a reasonable way. It's a replacement. You're replacing hormones, but you could look at it that way.
The point is that I'm taking them like a pill, in the morning, right?
To fix something that you don't have.
Right. So,
or enough of.
And the study was done for women over the age of 60.
Yep.
And as the pills are getting digested, the liver is changing what is intended to be into something else that actually ends up being harmful. And it's causing all these negative effects, and they black box it in the study.
Well, and there's one little more piece of information you have to add there. So it changed it to this 2-hydroxyl and 17-hydroxyl. It's just be like, to use a simple analogy, if you take in an apple and an apple is supposed to be healthy, it doesn't get absorbed in a piece of apple delivered to your cell.
Right, yeah.
It gets broken down in the useful part of it, the vitamin A, the vitamin E, get delivered to the cell, right? Same with these hormones. But what was getting delivered to the cell was 2-hydroxyl estrogen, 4-hydroxyl estrogen, which cause cancer, which cause blood clot. So that's that little step because of that metabolism. So because they were giving it to them by mouth in elderly females. So here's what happened. With later studies, they said, let's try what would prevent it from getting broken down in the liver and those bad things. Let's give it through the skin. Either rub it on as a cream or inject it. Because then it doesn't go to the liver.
Right.
It goes to the cells first. There's no first pass metabolism.
Okay.
When they did that, what you were giving them when you rub it on is what the cells are getting. Women did beautiful, wonderful. What they actually found is it decreased the risk of cardiovascular disease. I think it was 60%.
Wow.
Decreased the risk of bone fractures, 40%.
Wow.
They found all this great stuff from hormone replacement, but hormone replacement in a different way.
So because they changed the delivery method, they tacked on a bunch of bonus positive side effects.
Yes.
So how long did it take for us to get to that point?
And one other thing that made it positive that we can't go without missing, and that's this: when you give somebody something like the cream, an estrogen cream on, you can give them much less. You can give them 2 milligrams, a milligram, because it's not getting broken down. So it goes out everywhere. When you're given a pill, it's to go down, get digested, broken down, and then go to the whole body. You have to give them 20 milligrams, 40 milligrams, a bunch.
Wow.
So you give lower doses, no first pass metabolism into the bad guys, and now you get all those positive effects.
Wow.
No more height flashes, good weight distribution, all the things I said.
Yeah.
So women actually started getting the benefit again of living a full life. Now here's the other thing that they realized, and this is the most important thing I think for anybody listening to this who would think about hormone therapy. Certainly I encourage it in all my own family members. I'm a strong advocate of it, always have been. But I would tell you this, start premenopausal. Don't wait until you're menopausal, because all the studies they started women anywhere from 5 to 10 years premenopausal. So let's just say someone was kind of starting to notice changes, but they were still having their periods. They kind of had been testing maybe their blood work along the way, and they'd seen their hormones dropping off. The ovaries, adrenals, everything was still putting out the right amount of hormones. Don't wait for it to bottom out. Start replacing then. So you don't let people hit bottom. You pick them up along the way.
Gotcha.
That's been, I think, one of the most important findings to when as much as how to replace the hormones. And now they're safe and highly encouraged, and I think they've changed lives.
Well, I mean, it's been, let's just ballpark it to 30 years since the landmark never do this decision. Did it take that whole 30 years for us to get here, or has this been something that's been ready and now the FDA is recognizing? Did they finish this last week, or
well, yeah, great. And this leads into the law part of this. So what happened is that the real bad period when it was black box, avoid, be scared to death was probably early 90s through maybe 2010. And then in about 2008 to 10, people started picking up on, come on, this is a different delivery method. We're doing it earlier. These people are doing better. Studies started showing it. Probably very well proven then at that phase. Problem is it takes the FDA and changes. They lag that by about 10 years. So doctors still had that little fear factor of, if I'm given this hormone, there is a black box warning, but I promise you it's not what they say. Now doctors can give it. And there's no black confidence. There's no black box warning.
Okay, that's awesome.
Which gets to the legal part, right?
Yeah.
Because as a doctor, you don't want to be giving something that is telling you in bold words, could cause or will cause, because it did, and then you're writing it for a person, and then they get that condition and they come back and they say, doctor, you gave it to me. You knew there was this black box warning.
Yeah.
Right?
So that was the next space that I wanted to go to. There's a couple of questions I have on that. So what is a doctor's legal duty to inform or educate when they're dealing with black box medications? So, shift our perspective a little bit.
Yeah, let's go legal.
Here. Let's go legal.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
This is the medical legal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what we do.
You said, yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So a doctor has a duty to explain to a patient when there's a substantial risk of something.
Okay.
Just like if you're going to have surgery and there's a substantial risk of something, it's the doctor's duty to explain that. If he doesn't, he hasn't adequately informed you, and then you can't adequately consent to the procedure or to taking a medicine, because if you don't know, he's the doctor.
Right. He's supposed to know.
He's supposed to know.
Yeah.
He's supposed to tell you.
Okay.
And so if doctors are going to prescribe, they can prescribe black box medicines, but there's a couple things you have to do. You explain to the person the adverse effect. You explain to them when it likes to occur so they know the risk and what not to do. And then if it occurs, and if the person still wants the medicine, they then assume that risk for that. Here's a perfect example. Accutane for acne, a significant history of birth defects. There's tons of teenagers out there on Accutane, and they're doing it to prevent acne. It has a black box warning. Pregnancy and birth defects with this medicine are huge. It's a problem. Don't get pregnant on this medicine. If a teenage female comes into a doctor and he says, "Here's some Accutane," and she's actively trying to get pregnant. Say she's 18, 19 years old, just doesn't want acne. She's actively trying to get pregnant. He says nothing to her. She has a baby with birth defects. That doctor's got some issues. There's some serious medical malpractice issues there. He had a duty to inform, a duty to explain the risk, because there may have been an alternative. Maybe she would have opted for some other treatment method, and if she'd only known. Now, if the doctor says to her, "Look, I think you should be on birth control while you're on this, or you should refrain from sexual activity. We're going to get your acne cleared up." Then afterwards, there's a 6 or 12-week washout period. Then I'm fine with it. If he explained that, she goes and gets pregnant and has a deformed baby, she assumes that. She took that on. So yeah, they prescribe, but with informed consent, or there's a malpractice issue.
Okay. So then talk to me a little bit more about that malpractice issue, because there's got to be some kind of a legal opinion that informs that. Like, we had to come to this in the law, and I'll say specifically in Colorado, these aren't just laws that are written from times past, right? So what are some landmark opinions or important decisions that you can think of that influence this concept of communicating that consent?
I don't have a case memorized for informed consent, which was largely where this would fall into.
Okay.
But the legal principle.
Yes, let's do
that
this.
goes to all of the cases that are out there. So, and the reason that the specific cases or a specific case I don't recall is because it's cases. So normally a case builds upon a case to get where we are.
Okay.
The reason is every situation has very specific facts. And those very specific facts affects how a court rules. And in the U.S., we use case precedent to build our case law.
Right.
So it's normally like 4, 5, 6, 7 cases that build a single principle.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, the basic case, though, on this would be this. You look at the profession, the doctor, and the doctor has to first have a duty. If he doesn't have a duty, there can be no malpractice. What's a doctor's duty? He has a duty to safely treat, prescribe, inform, and follow up. That's his duty. If a doctor does that, he's accomplished his duty. If he hasn't, he breaches that. So if you breach a duty, meaning you don't do any of those things properly.
Or you don't do all of them properly.
Or don't do all of them.
You have to do all of them properly.
That's right. Maybe, yeah, exactly. Maybe you understand it and you prescribe and you don't inform, and you don't give an alternative. See, a lot of people would choose an alternative.
Yeah, especially if they have the information.
If I told you acetaminophen causes liver failure, but ibuprofen doesn't, which in fact it does not, you might go, I'll take the ibuprofen.
I'll take the ibuprofen, yeah.
Right.
If that's a concern that I'm aware of my health situation.
Right.
Because the doctor's saying, hey, I have these options for you. Here's one, here's the other. But your medical situation dictates that you should be concerned about this option because of the black box warning.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, imagine if you already knew you had a fatty liver and I went and gave you acetaminophen and I didn't tell you about it.
Yeah.
You'd be like, doctor, why didn't you just give me ibuprofen? I would have taken that.
Right.
I failed to inform you. So there's a duty.
Okay.
If I breach that duty, that's the second step. I have to breach it. And that's where 2 steps in malpractice cases have become critical. It's duty, breach, causation, and then damages. Those are the 4 steps. They're the 4 base steps that form all those cases. Okay. You have a duty to prescribe safely, explain, to understand, to know as a physician what you're doing. If you breach that duty, and I don't do that, I don't tell you, there's still not malpractice unless I've caused a problem. So what happens a lot of times, people will say, my doctor's giving, let's go to the hormone thing. My doctor's still giving me oral estrogens. He's doing this, he's doing that. Okay, isn't that malpractice? Well, what damages have you had? Did it cause anything? Well, no. Hasn't caused anything I'm aware of. Ooh, your doctor dodged a bullet.
Okay, so there does have to be something you can draw a line through for all of those things.
That's right, it has to connect.
Okay.
I didn't tell you about the black box warning of acetaminophen. We'll pretend it's prescription for a minute. I gave it to you. I didn't ask you if you had a history of fatty liver. I didn't tell you there was an alternative. You took it. You got then liver failure and ended up on one of those 1,600 to 2,000 people on transplant list. There's a direct line, and I had a duty to tell. I breached the duty, and it caused you now to have liver failure. And then that's where we get to damages, and that's the last place of a malpractice case. So what are the damages? What's the person going to have to deal with for the rest of their life? In the case of livers, for example, your liver can get incredibly scarred. And if you have just a little chunk of liver left, it'll regenerate and regenerate and regenerate, and you can end up with a perfect liver if you don't abuse it again over the next 4 to 6 years. Perfect.
That's incredible.
Perfect. It's a remarkable organ. It will be great forever. So there's not a lot of damages there if we stop in time, because you'll never need any special treatment or any special meds. In fact, you could go back to drinking beer later once you get essentially generate a whole fresh, brand new liver, right? So there has to be damages. And in damages, what it means is there's something you have to live with for the rest of your life. So in the case of NSAIDs, we talked about ibuprofen, that's an NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory.
Gotcha.
Those tend to cause kidney issues. Kidneys are not like livers. Livers regenerate, kidneys don't. So if you overdose on NSAIDs, you will damage your kidneys substantially. Once your kidneys are damaged, they're always damaged. So there's an example of 2 very common medicines we have, conditions where I could blow it. One you could come back from and have a really hard time proving long-term damages from my mistake as a doctor. The other one, very easily proving long-term damages. I could improperly advise you on the use of NSAIDs. When you have bad kidneys, you could end up with worse kidneys and be this close to dialysis where you never would have been, will never recover. I could be now liable for your dialysis for the rest of your life.
Wow. Yeah, and so making sure you're meeting all 4 of those steps is fulfilling your duty as a doctor.
That's right.
I mean, if doctors are fulfilling their duties, we don't have any problems, right? And you're okay, and we can safely work with these medications that can have these adverse side effects. But the concept of malpractice, list those 4 again: duty, breach, causation, and damages. Okay, there you go.
That's the basis.
I have a couple more questions for you about this, but we're running close on time.
Yes.
So I want to do a little sign off with you. And I was thinking about this the other day because we were in a meeting earlier and you were kind of talking about your schedule. And obviously you're a successful and accomplished gentleman. And one of the things that you kind of mentioned it in passing, and you were talking about your habit list at the beginning of your day every day. And I just thought that would be I want to take a couple minutes at the end of the show here, I think that's an admirable quality. What are some things that are on your habit list that you do every single day? And how would you encourage someone who wants to start doing something like that to construct that list?
Yeah, so that dives into obviously very personal, and I like that. I like personal questions. And I literally have on my calendar, what Bradford's referring to is on my calendar, I have plugged in at 6 a.m. every morning, habit list, every day. Because the first thing I think is important to write things down that you want to do. You want to accomplish any goal, you got to write it down. And it's just a reminder, and I don't care how many years you've been doing it, you have to have it somewhere. And then you have to have those things that get you properly aligned. And for me, every day starts with prayer. I do, and reading every single day is part of my habit list. So you normally say a prayer first thing in the morning just to get realigned in my mind and how my mindset correct. The second thing I do is I normally read a little bit of the Bible, small little piece, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get my heart in the right spot, remind me of some principles that are important to me. Again, this is my method. And then what I do is I link habits. Another successful way to form habits is if you link them to something. So for example, and you have to do them for a while. They've proven that basically you have to do something for probably 2 months. There's stuff out there that says 18 to 21 days, but that's a bunch of BS. I link habits. So I know when I read the Bible, for example, I'm going to do 25 push-ups every single time. And that's part of my habit list. And so I just do the same thing every day that positions my day well. And the last thing I do every single day is I organize my calendar. I organize my day. You can't go into a day without a game plan. That's why coaches game plan for games and pro sports. I want to treat my day like it's a pro sport. I game plan for every single day, every single minute of every single day.
That's awesome. And I think that's something I want to start doing stuff like that and having that daily routine and that morning of, okay, this is how I start fresh every day. I know my parents had that when I was living in their house as a kid. And, I think it's just a great example of a habit that, successful people that, you want to add something. That's a great thing, great place to start.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks. It's a huge key to success because you can tag anything to it.
Yeah. And I think the linking them is an excellent, I've not heard that before. So the concept of saying, hey, I know this one's easy for me. I do this every day, but now I'm going to take something that's a little bit harder for me to do. And I'm going to make sure every time I do the thing that's easy for me, I'm going to add that thing that's a little bit harder. And I just do them together in tandem. So they start becoming easier and easier.
They're a package deal.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, hey, that's all the time we have for today. Folks, thanks for joining us again. We appreciate you tuning in and listening. Come back because I think I've got some more questions for you. I want to see if we can get a couple more on this black box. I've got some more medical side that I want to get to.
All right.
So let's dive a little bit deeper. We'll break it down a little bit more on the next episode of the Doctor Lawyer Breakdown. We'll see you all then.